Hello and welcome to another episode of the CG Garage. This is episode number 327, featuring the return of David Levy on the subject of NFTs. If you guys have not listened to David Levy's previous episode, check it out. You'll probably be at the bottom of these show notes, but you should definitely check out David's background because he's a very interesting person, concept artist. But he approached me a few months ago about NFTs, and he needed some help on some information, and actually some information on Chaos Cloud, which is what he used to do his NFTs. And it was really interesting. So I said, hey, you want to be on the podcast? Because I really sort of want to dive deep into what NFTs are and let people know a little bit more information about it. And he did. So Kristen, what did you think of this? You've been following this for a few episodes now. What did you think of David on the NFT world?
Well, this one was really good. Kind of like David Yermak, where you kind of go into depth, but it's different because David's more of an artist. So it was great to hear kind of the benefits of NFTs and then what they mean for established artists. And then you both go more into depth on like the ethical and environmental concerns on NFTs, which we've talked about in previous podcasts. As David says, it's still so new and it's kind of like the wild, wild west out there. So you guys just touch on so many good points that have been touched on, but you kind of go into more in depth on everything. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's from David's perspective, from an artist's perspective on what that implication has been on his world. And, I don't necessarily want to take any sides on it. I think that there's definitely some repercussions to NFTs that need to be considered, especially sort of the environmental ones, as you mentioned before, but also just what this means to the artist world and the risks that are being taken in this area, because, it's all harnessed around cryptocurrency, and that's very volatile. So there's definitely risks involved in all of those things. But I still think that this is information that people want to know about. And there's a lot of artists out there that are trying to figure this out. And I'd love to be able to do that. So I really thank David for giving his perspective on this. And also, just to let you guys know, we're still looking at more people to interview on this subject that have different roles they play in the NFT market. So I thought it'd be, so just keep an eye out on those things, which is cool. There's a fun news that just came out recently, and I just wanted to make sure you guys are aware of it. Kristen, tell people a little bit about what Babak Bina is doing.
All right. Well, his short film was just released. It's called The Seahorse Trainer. And if you go to Vimeo, if you just type in The Seahorse Trainer, it will come up. And all the CG elements in this film have been shaded and rendered with V-Ray. And it's beautiful. You and I both watched it this morning. So
yeah, it's really, really cool. Definitely check it out. Babak was on the podcast before, so you can check out his previous, I don't remember which episode it was, but it wasn't that long ago that he was on. But he talks a little bit about doing the short film, and it's really great now that it's out. It's been in a bunch of festivals, so now he can put it out publicly on Vimeo. So you should definitely check it out. I thought it was really, really beautiful. It is a live action film with a lot of CG in it, so it's really kind of cool to see that. And it's really beautiful. So definitely check it out, and congrats Babak on such an amazing short film, an accomplishment. Definitely an accomplishment. I know how hard it is to make short films. Okay, we have one event coming up. Kristen, what's going on?
You can go to chaos.com/events to find out more. But on June 8th, it's called Exploring V-Ray 5 for 3ds Max with Jonas Noel. Hope I said that name right. And you can discover the new features of V-Ray for 3ds Max, plus workflow tips from Jonas. So that'll be
perfect.
Fun.
Again, that's on June 8th, and you can get all this information at chaos.com/events. For all other Chaos news, just go to chaos.com and follow us there. And if people want to know more about the podcast, where can they go, Kristen?
You can go to facebook.com/CG Garage Podcast or chaos.com/CG Garage. And if you want to watch us on YouTube, go to youtube.com/Chaos Group TV.
Perfect. And if you guys have ideas of other things you'd like to discuss or want some feedback on this podcast or other upcoming podcasts you want to hear about, let us know. labs@chaosgroup.com is the best way to reach us via email. Again, that's labs@chaosgroup.com. And also don't forget, leave us a rating on Apple Podcast and review and share us with your friends. All right. That being said, please enjoy this really cool podcast, The Return of David Levy on the subject of NFTs.
Welcome to another CG garage where the chaos group talks. You'll know it's over when the last bucket drops. We're gonna fire off rays in high dynamic range. We know that ambient occlusion is passe. Global illumination won't lead you astray. And while image-based lighting is really swell, you need to make sure everything has Fresnel.
All right. So, David, we have talked quite a bit over some time, and you came up to me with a thing of like, Chris, have you heard what's going on? That was the conversation we had. And it was about like, obviously this big boom in an NFT market, right? And it has affected quite a bit of how artists think and what art means, especially digital artists. And I've been sort of continuing to do podcasts about this on this subject. But I want to hear from the perspective of your perspective. First of all, how did you hear about it? How did you get into it? What's the story? And then I want to get into some of the other details as we go. So tell us your experience with NFTs so far.
So it's been, I would say it's been quite a ride. The first time I heard about it was through a friend of mine, Fausto Di Martini. Mm-hmm. I was just calling him because every time I need to buy a new machine, I contact him because we use the same softwares, the same renderings, and the same hardware in general. So I was just contacting him to see how he's doing and gather some information. And then he mentioned it. He said, "Hey, have you heard about that whole thing about NFT?" I'm like, "What? No, I've been so busy at work that I barely have time to just look at the news lately." So. And from what he described, it sounded very interesting. So right away, I contacted another friend of mine who's already really deeply involved in that. His name is John Park. He's a very successful artist and also very successful now NFT artist. And a person that I really respect, deeply. So I contacted him and he explained to me overall how the thing functions, and I thought that sounds like it could be a great new source of revenue for experienced artists. That was my first take on this.
But did you know much about it? I mean, did you have any? I mean, I'm sure you must have had questions, right?
I knew, honestly, before contacting Fausto, I knew nothing about it.
Okay.
I had heard, of course, about Beeple. Right. But I thought that there was like a very unique thing, that was separate and so special, But I didn't realize that it was starting to slowly democratize, So that was the first time I heard it in a more plausible way, I would say.
Right. Right. Well, let's talk about some of the positives first. Yes. Because there's also some questions and some things that have happened. On the positive side of things, what are some of the things? Obviously, it's a source of, you said it's a source of income that you can get as an artist. But really, what are some of the other things that you think are help artists or benefit the artist community here?
I think it's a very deeply. I think it's a very deep change in paradigm for the industry. I think it's going to affect our industry for the years to come, maybe in a way that is beyond what we can imagine right now in our discussion right now. I think it's opening opportunities for older artists, more veteran artists, I should say, like myself, but also for upcoming artists, young artists, and everything in between. I think it's opening new avenue of creations, new formats of creations. And when it comes to art, the format is very important, of course. Whether you talk about oil painting or digital painting or movie making or sculpting, the format that is used interacts with the viewer and the spectator in ways that are very specific and different for each of those formats. So I think it's opening a new door that is, I think it's mind-boggling. I mean, I wasn't able to sleep the first 3 weeks I heard about it.
Okay. I mean, you thought about the art form itself, right? Like the art form itself can be transformative, right?
Yes.
And you can, But nothing stopped before NFTs. Nothing has stopped you from making this kind of art.
That's true. That's very true. And I've never stopped making that kind of art.
Right.
I've done it really mostly, I mean, I'd say for two reasons. For, first of all, pleasure. That's why I started doing it. And also to make ends meet, you know. And here it's becoming like a new thing. It's in between. It could be either a blend of both, you know, or something that could be done in terms of collaboration and sparking new development and new creation that could be its own thing, you know. So I think it's the fact that it's a new tool, a new format, a new everything. I think just as a concept artist, it's very exciting and interesting, you know. After that, whether it's adapted to all artists, I think something still to prove, you know, and something to delve into. But I think we're seeing really like the very, very first little spark of it, you know. And it started with a big bang, you know, the Beeple thing. And then there were like slightly smaller explosions. I think we're going to see again other big bangs, you know, that are going to rock our industry. And not just our industry, but it's going to rock music industry. It's going to rock many other industries. So I think it's really like the birth of a new universe, I would say.
So, but what about the idea of like you were already paid to be an artist,
Correct.
right? That's your job. Your job is to make beautiful pieces of art that represent someone else's idea, which is also
That's
kind
correct.
of a thing, right?
Yeah.
So now I mean, if you're a successful NFT artist, you don't have to do that anymore. You can only concentrate on doing the things you want to do, right?
Well, and that's where it becomes a little shifty, I would say. Is that in the end you have a buyer, you know, which is someone with a collector, you know, someone who's going to want your art or not want your art, and his choices are going to be themselves moving, you know. So the target is going to be moving, and so in some ways, we're back into a similar system, you know, where you're working, sure, for yourself, you know, to create artwork, but there's very little doubt that the work you're going to be producing is most probably going to be influenced by either the other pieces that are selling or the ones that are not selling, you know, and the demand of the market. It is a market in the end. It's an art market. It is not necessarily like a movie production or game production market, but it's another market. And knowing if your art is going to have like a response in that market is a big question mark.
And it's a kind of a chicken or the egg thing, right? Because you probably would not be invited, because let's talk about those markets, right?
Yes.
It's still an exclusive club to be invited in these markets. I mean, there are clubs where anyone can go and sell stuff, but then you get lost in the noise, right? You want to be part of an NFT market, like Super Rare or some of the other ones out there, or Foundation or something like that. And you have to be invited into those situations. Isn't that similar to being invited into a gallery of some kind?
I think it is the way it is right now. I think it's because, once again, it's the beginning. And there's a lot of people that necessarily, I mean, the buyer may be risk averse. You know, they may want to, and they may not know everything about illustration and images and things like that. And they may want to have a place where it's easier for them to find these things. But, you know, I mean, when you think about it, you know, if you look at Instagram, you know, Instagram is like a place, you know, where there are selected artists, you know, they are selected by the people for the most part. You can buy yourself into Instagram, of course. Some companies offer that, you know, and you can buy yourself in Instagram through your recognition to another field, you know, if you're an actor or if you're, I mean, there are different ways to become successful on Instagram. The only big difference, which I'm sure Instagram is going to realize, or has probably realized already, is that there's no direct way for the person posting on Instagram to make a revenue. I think what NFT is offering is a little bit of that, which is you have a place where you can put yourself, but in exchange for the whole platform raising, you're also getting paid. So I think it's not everything. It's obvious to me that NFTs will be democratized very, very soon on everybody level. Is that going to change really? I mean, people are complaining about the fact that some people are selected on some platforms and on others and things like that. In the end, I think that there is a self-balancing happening anyway. People that have been invited on those platforms, on Super Rare and Foundation, are people that are already doing really, really well on Instagram. And whether it's a collector or the platform that's wanting those people to get on board, I mean, it's obvious that they have a monetary gain,
Right.
And taking risks for now is not necessarily on top of their list. For now, their main goal is to make money.
Yes. But it's interesting because, I've been looking, if you look at what's on some of these platforms, I've actually been browsing Foundation quite a bit recently and sort of looking at what's on there, And I don't know, do you remember Raf? He was at THU, Raf Grassetti.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Yeah. So he's actually pretty successful on Foundation as well. But he's been doing, he's well known for doing character work, right? So he creates these busts of famous people that are deep in the crypto world, right? Mm-hmm. And so who like Elon Musk or a bunch of people that invented crypto and all these different things that are out there, right? And he did that because he's trying to sell this to people who like crypto.
For sure. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like pandering to that audience. It's not necessarily self-expression, et cetera. And they're caricatures, and they're great. They're caricatures. But it seems like this is content that's selling to an audience that's excited about something, and not necessarily always people that are into beautiful art or know anything about art. So, like memes are selling like crazy. The Disaster Girl sold for $450,000, right? Mm-hmm. Excuse me. So that's also fascinating. If you think about that.
Yeah.
So the quality of the work, is it really the quality, or is it the story that people are going after? What is it that's selling on these markets?
I think it's all over the place, and I think the buyers are all over the place too. The buyers are not necessarily focusing on one thing, one industry or thing. I mean, some industries may have more appeal than others. I think it's a big blend of a lot of things. It's a blend of pop culture. It's a blend of artistry and quality of artistry that can be recognized. It's also hype based, big time. Whether you are hypeable or not. There's a lot of parameters that are in play, and I think that's what I call the Big Bang. It's like right now all these galaxies are going in all directions. There's like various things that are selling, others that are not. Some that are maybe selling after their artist is dead. Maybe some, it's impossible to predict. I think it's a wild west. And there are many times where I arrived into a certain industry, like the game industry was already, that period had already passed, and I feel like for the first time in my life, I'm landing into a place where everything can be done, and I think it's opening a lot of possibilities. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what can be done. Like obviously Raf found out like, these guys like crypto, I'm going to make some crypto stuff for them, So they found something, it's like, this is what's going to sell. So you have to think about what people want to buy when you're creating correct. Those art. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? What do you think, what did you create, or things that you want to create in that world?
So the things that I'm starting to create, I feel don't necessarily have a market yet, So I have different phases. I started by just selling like a few things that I've done in the past, like actually illustrations I've done for THU that I did either as demos and those sold, and And when it comes to the price, to the amount of work I put in, it was fair. It wasn't like necessarily vastly superior or vastly inferior. It was fair for the amount of work I had put in. The things I'm trying to sell now is more towards the things that I've always loved. And like you said, I'm an artist that's hired on productions on a regular basis. That's my job, and so I have a revenue. And for me to go into the, I don't necessarily try to please necessarily to a specific audience. I really try to mostly please myself first. If it sells, great. If it doesn't sell, well, then maybe either my audience doesn't exist and will never exist, or may exist in the future, or may not. But I'm really trying to communicate with the art form that I do on a more personal level. The things I've always been obsessed with science fiction. So the things that I'm trying to show in my science fiction work is things that are more that are really embedding technology and I'd say philosophy, I guess, or psychology, because these are all the fields that interest me, which is like what's going to happen in our future, in terms of what once the mind can be put into data, if ever, what is that going to mean for humanity? These are subjects that interest me. And honestly, I don't think that's exactly what NFTs are about lately. NFTs lately are really much more about other things, and more, I'd say, maybe more visually engaging and more appealing things, or crypto things, and my hope is that one day, there will be people interested into the same subjects I'm interested into, which is science fiction and humanity, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'll get to the science fiction. Obviously, your art is very well known, and I remember, when I worked went back to DD, which was I think from the first time I ran into you, and we were working on Tron, and I went to Eric Barba's office, and there's tons of your artwork all over Eric Barba's walls because it was all reference to Tron, right? And you did incredible work, and it's like you have to make it look like that, and that's what David drew, and that's how Joe likes it, et cetera, et cetera. And so those are beautiful pieces of artwork that Disney owns, right?
Correct.
Now, there's nothing stopping Disney from selling those as NFTs, like own the concept of Tron, that did that. How do you feel about that? Because if the studios start entering the NFT market and start selling, I guess they paid you to do it, and then they're free to do whatever they want to.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes, but at the same time, one could argue that if they do sell my NFTs, and that they are successful, that collectors may want to buy my art after, so it could be a good advertising system for me. And like you said, there's nothing that protects Disney from selling my artwork, but at the same time, the exposure that would have, like, for example, in the art books that are being sold, very rarely, I don't remember specifically for Tron, but like in Tron, I had a lot of pieces in there. I don't remember my name being associated with the pieces. It's really about Disney, So if Disney decides to sell my artwork, I can advertise it and potentially make money with that, which is something that until now wasn't really possible because there's a kind of democratization thanks to NFTs of people realizing who the people are behind those big blockbusters, and for which we've always, I would say, for most of us, at least in the shadows, aside from a few specific personalities, like Moebius, Sid Mead, or which are still niche market. If you ask someone on the street, do you know who Sid Mead is? There's 99% chance that no.
Right.
So it could be a door opening to more of I would say, like a superstar market for some artists. They are already very well known, which will go to the next level. Yes.
Now, so going back on that, I want to get to that too, but I want to not leave the other subject. Yeah. Would you consider selling instead of selling your concept art to the studio, selling it as an NFT to the studio?
Well, it's a possibility. The difficulty with the NFT is the instability.
Okay.
Is that what I still enjoy to this day with a job is the fact that if I am hired, there is, there is instability in there too, but I'm building up on years of experience and practice in order to consolidate my hiring on a project for a long-term basis. NFT is really all over the place right now. Unless my name is attached, like you say, if my name is attached to a project and Disney attaches it with me, I'm game, because there's a lot of chances that Disney will bring much more revenue than I will ever do on my own, Right. So I do believe that there is and I wouldn't be surprised if already some companies would offer those possibilities to some artists. I do know of like some music labels, that are making deals right now with artists in order to combine, talents in order to sell more for everybody's sake.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting as well. Let's talk a little bit about the artist community. How has this affected the artist community, your relationships? Because I'm hearing some mixed reactions.
Yes.
And what was Ian Spriggs, he told me, it was like, when likes turn into dollars, it becomes nasty sometimes.
That's very true. And one of my friends told me, another artist friend told me, what's shocking is that for the first time in a long time, what artists make money-wise is displayed for everyone to see. And right. I think when this happens, there's different reactions. I think when I heard about some artists making millions, my first reaction is like, why not me too? And I think it's a really human reaction.
Sure.
But I think and my other reaction was also good for him. Right. Because honestly, I've been around for a long time, and I know how hard it is to get to a specific level in that field, And when I see someone from my industry succeeding on a level that is unseen before, my thoughts goes, well, what he's doing is going to help me. Right. But not everybody can necessarily get that angle, and that point of view. There has been a lot of backlash. I think it's created like a reactions, positive and negative, on the most wide spectrum I've seen in our industry ever. I've seen from amazing reactions to the most hateful, vitriolic reactions to, where people were literally insulting other people directly on social media. And I think it's, in some ways, it's unavoidable. And I think it is necessary. The dust will settle down. This whole system, once again, is very new, and it's going to create jealousy, envy. It's going to create happiness. It's going to create life changes. It's going to create artists that came out of nowhere to be able to live a proper life on a yearly basis. That's why this was, I would say, the biggest earthquake I've ever seen in our industry, ever.
Yeah, I think specifically like concept artists are the ones that are the most affected by this, because they're the ones who actually have something, they have some credit behind it. It's like, I'm the concept artist for this game, for this movie, for this whatever. So that makes them, like your, Disney thing, what like you described, was like that markets you, right? That was a market behind you.
For sure.
So the only reason, one of the reasons you're able to get into that market is because they're looking for someone with a lot of Instagram followers. And the reason they're looking for that person is because there's a story behind the work. Oh, this is a really cool person. He's done a bunch of work for this Marvel film or Star Wars or whatever. So there's a little bit of that. So the jealousy was always there in some ways. But somehow,
yes, there is something a little more, I'd say, twisted about what you just said. Okay, is the fact that the reason why they're looking for people that have that background is for resale value.
Of course,
and that's also like something to keep in mind, is that this is an investment game. This is more this is more akin to Las Vegas than it is to necessarily buying a famous piece of art. It's a little bit of both.
Right. Yeah. So they have to invest in you in some ways, and that's, and they want to say, hey, or it's going to at least maintain its value.
That's correct.
right? Because honestly speaking, if you like if I like the great work of David Levy, I can just go to your site and just look at it for free.
Totally.
I don't have to own it.
Completely. Yeah.
So that's the thing that's that's a little bit different. But now suddenly it turns into that. What is the argument? What is the argument? This person doesn't like, I'm not saying you have to name names or whatever, but is it just this person doesn't deserve this fame or money, or is it they're going to say, oh, well, NFTs are destroying the planet and you're responsible for that?
Well, I think it's once again, it's all over the spectrum. Some people are saying, look at the people that are invited on those sites. Those guys are like budding up, and they are the usual suspects. And then they are blocking. We're basically cock blocking the younger guys, which I mean. Why would we? We're just concept artists. It's not like we're like grand manipulators or anything like that.
Right.
We're just trying to not only make a living, we're trying to be successful. We're trying to be known, because in the end, I mean, being an artist is a lot about that. Is having, I'd say, validation from the people by developing an art skill to a level that is masterful, so that people can realize the amount of pain that's been put behind it, So I've seen a lot of very, very different reactions. There is the pollution aspect of it, which to me, I mean, I think there's a lot of hypocrisy going on, Look, I've been vegan, for the last 11 years now. And my whole family has been, family of 4, we've been vegan for the last 7 years. And the consumption of, when it comes to carbon, compared to someone who is not vegan, and I'm not like, that's not something I'm gonna scream on social media or anything, But having someone criticizing another person without knowing that person on social media, on Twitter or anywhere else, I think is very, very dangerous, and I think it's very plain unfair. Why would you be aggressive to one? Let's pick an artist. I have an example in my mind that that is, thanks to making money, has been able to pay a surgery for his brother. Okay,
right.
I'm not gonna name any artist, whatever. Who can criticize that person for the choices that he's made?
Right.
I mean, I'm not in a position to criticize that person, and someone who doesn't know him, doesn't know his family situation. I think, what gives you the possibility to destroy that person online, and decide to cancel him? Or, I mean, these are ethical questions that we never had to question before as artists, So
sure, it's true. It's also very interesting because this also seems a little misinformed, and I've talked about this a little bit with other people. Like the argument, obviously, that it creates pollution is the fact that it uses a lot of compute power, right? Compute power uses whatever the computer is plugged into as a power source, and there's a lot of compute power that you need to do that. But so does a lot of other things use compute power.
Very much so. Very much so.
Your social network uses a lot of compute power. So if you're sitting there screaming on Facebook,
your Gmail account with thousands of emails not deleted, that's archived, and that's using power too. Watching Netflix uses power.
Watching Netflix is powered, or just even any animation out there that's all CG uses. We know how much render power is necessary to render something, right?
Completely. Just making a movie in itself is one of the really bad things to do. Making a movie, when it comes to destruction of sets, and construction and CG, and I mean, it's a very complex situation and problem that. I mean, unless every single one of us have our carbon footprint on top of their Twitter account, I don't want anybody to criticize me, and I don't want to criticize anybody on this.
Right. Yeah, and it seems a little bit like, oh, you're destroying half the rainforest because you're making an NFT. That seems like it's jumped through a lot of conclusions to make that assumption.
Very much so. Yes.
So, but again, I don't necessarily deny the fact that there's a lot of wasted compute power to go into to mining, and there's other ways that obviously are happening. Ethereum is investigating trying to move over to Ethereum too, and that's also very interesting as well. But I'm also, there's something about the artist community that's always been fascinating to me. So, you and I have been to THU a few times, and that's a very strongly supportive community of people that are doing things. And you look at sites like ArtStation, and ArtStation is very much in that area. Do you feel that the flavor now, because of some of the things you've said, those places, are people going back to those places and trying to find support, or is it now people are kind of guarding themselves a little bit more because of the subject of NFTs at this point?
There's no doubt that I know of a quite numerous examples of non-artists that have had to protect themselves from it, and just be quiet about the subject and just not get into it. I think it's a very, very poisonous discussion right now. And I think until it's democratized, the discussion more than it is already. I think it's actually pretty democratized because I've seen a spectrum of artists on those platforms that is much wider than people try to make it sound. I've seen people doing just pixel art. I've seen people doing 3D art. I've seen people doing 2D art, animation. I've seen people doing pencil art that's digitized. I've seen people putting their fingers in their nose and selling it. I've seen everything. Right. So I do feel like it's going to be very, very common in the near future.
Yeah, and I've followed I was an art major and I studied art history, and for a long time art was not necessarily about craft.
Exactly. Right? That's correct. Yeah.
It was about ideas or something you wanted to express. You can, it's not like, oh, this is a really good painter, he represented that person in a very photoreal way. That is not necessarily art, that's craft.
That's correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you can put a spear through a television and have a different story, and that's considered art as well. So there's different ways of doing things that is very interesting.
Yeah, I think you're very correct. And I think, if anything, the NFTs have proven that, is that beauty lies in the viewer,
Right.
And it's very relative. Art is very relative. Now, there's always been, I've seen many disputes online about in our community about oh, look at that. I cannot believe they sold this piece of modern art for that much or whatever. Well, here you go. Now you have it. Everything is online. Everything is possible. And what is selling is not necessarily what you would expect. And in the end, whoever buys it is right.
Yeah. It was very, it is very interesting, like what's out there. But let's talk a little bit about the forms of art. Obviously, you're able to sell short animations, right? Which is an interesting idea, because that's a form of art that can really kind of only exist digitally in some ways, right?
That's correct. I think there is definitely one type of art that's already very big on NFTs. Just like in the course of 2 months, it's become more and more obvious that if you want to really hit those big numbers, animation is probably the key to it. And which raises the question of directing, and creating stories and selling those stories on a digital platform like YouTube or like Vimeo or anything. But that is more, that doesn't necessarily have to be storytelling. It can be anything as long as it's creating an emotion, which is what art is about, which is creating something so that people react to it in a positive or negative manner, or whatever. So I think there's animation is definitely where things are going. And to be honest, concept art is going towards animation anyway. So whether if you want to be competitive, I think in our world, you're going to have to be able to do these things. Some things are becoming simpler, like creating lighting, creating shaders, and creating even atmosphere, worlds, and telling stories in the end may be one of the key, or creating emotions, one of the key elements that we're going to want to create. And when it comes to concept art, that's what we do. We pre-digest emotions so that when production arrives, they know exactly visually where they want to go. And so there's that compression between the beginning of the movie production to the end of production that is coming closer and closer and closer, and it's coming closer to us concept artists, where people are wanting to see animation, things moving. Even now on the last project we worked on, we were asked on a regular basis to create animation so we would understand the concept better. So and I think NFTs are calling for that because it's a mix of hype, emotion, reaction, and nothing is better than that, than something moving, you know?
Yeah, and it's also something that's always going to be digital, right? In a lot of ways. I know people. There was someone, I forgot. It might have been a different podcast. I've recorded a ton of podcasts lately. So, but anyway, someone was talking about specifically trying to sell videos of waves, I believe it was. But they were trying to do that as art, and so the only way they could do that is to sell the whole TV. You know, that was playing the video, that was embedded with a card that had the, you know, like, and that's how you sell it, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, that seems a little convoluted, because I guess people felt like they needed to own a thing, right?
Yeah. And I think that having to own a thing, I think is something that's not necessarily going to last much. And when I think, I'm talking about the physical thing, you know, and that's what I think is so deeply powerful about NFTs. Is that it's allowing us artists, you know, and everybody actually everybody as an artist to become an artist and to leave your trace in a human world in a way that is permanent. Because, you know, I mean, computers now are part of our everyday life, you know, and until humanity is gone, some form of internet will exist, okay? So a digital footprint will exist. And it's the first time that I feel in my life that my digital footprint as an artist could stand the test of time. If I am able to sell an NFT online in a digital format, to me it's much more valuable than a physical format, because it will probably stay digitally until humanity is gone. And this is way more powerful than selling a painting, a physical painting.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about that, because one is, I'm wondering how true that really is, and not to say that you're right or wrong, but like, what if Super Rare goes away as a site? You know, that was a fad. Then all those NFTs just kind of, well, the NFTs exist because they're part of the blockchain.
That's correct.
But what about what they're pointing to, the actual piece of art? You know, like, I mean,
it's a good question. I wouldn't know technically exactly, but I would know that the fact that digital transaction has existed and is reproduced on a blockchain makes that specific file live on those. It's a token, you know. So I'm assuming it's alive on other places.
Right.
And if it's not, I mean, it would become so, you know. I think that's where the power of it is. You know?
But also it's the format, right? So like, for example, let's pretend NFTs was a thing like 20 years ago, right? Yeah. Let's pretend. Yeah. And then animations were like, just like you said, there was all the same things happened, but 20 years ago. But then 20 years ago, people might have made their NFTs with Flash.
Correct.
Flash is no longer anywhere on the internet because of, you know, its security. So does all that content disappear, or does it get converted? And then if it gets converted, it's no longer the original.
It's a very good question. I don't have an answer to that, but you may say that that specific Flash file, you know, you may have to have a very specific software in order to play that one, you know, right. And which makes it even more of a collector. Oh, sorry, you can't play it on all platforms. You know, you can only play. So you may end up with a digital file that exists that is not readable, but is still an amazing piece of art that's historical. You see what I mean? There's so many possibilities, you know.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's interesting. I was just having a conversation with an old friend of mine who I haven't talked to in a long time, and this has actually been the wonderful thing about the pandemic. And I hate to say the wonderful thing about the pandemic, but I mean it. And I somehow reconnect with people I haven't spoken with for 20
Same
years.
Here. Yes.
And it's been really nice. So I've been talking to my friend Ryan, who I actually did a podcast with, and he and I were just chatting about stuff. And I somehow the conversation happened of the first animation I've ever done, right? The first thing I ever created in CG was actually on a Next computer with Mathematica, and I was telling the school, it's like, it was really cool because I'd love to see it. I was like, I have no idea where that thing is. Like, where does it exist? Where is it? I mean, to me, it's valuable as a story, and it's like, I really wish I could see that again.
Yeah.
And I have no idea where it is. So part of me is like, those zip disks that we had a long time ago. What happened to all of those?
Zip disks,
Yeah. What happened to all of those?
Yeah.
So I do believe that like having some ability to say it feels more like it's got a shelf life in some ways.
Yeah. And I mean, we haven't seen these NFTs happening yet, but it's very plausible. I mean, imagine if tomorrow Bill Gates was to sell his first line of code. I mean, I wouldn't want to buy this.
Right.
And even though it may be in a format that's necessarily not readable, in a programming manner, but it could be buyable as a text file, I mean, I would understand the value of that, as an artist. I consider that being a talented programmer is very similar to being a talented artist,
Yeah, for sure. No, there is value. I mean, it's like anything that's collectible, right? Like
That's
anything
exactly
collectible has to be, is like, I always use the example of, a $20,000 baseball. It's just a baseball, but it's $20,000 because it was Mickey Mantle's 500th home run or whatever. You know what
Exactly.
I mean? So it's just a baseball, and it's not a piece of art, but there's a story attached to it, right? And so the same thing, and not necessarily putting down what you did, but it's like, but your art has a story behind it. That's why it's going to sell well, right? So it's not always about the thing that's going on there. So it's very interesting.
And it's a lot about, once again, like I said earlier, it's a lot about the investment,
right?
And the investment value that this piece may have,
Yeah.
And value changes over time. And the reasons why some things are more valuable than others, if an artist passes away, or there's many reasons why a specific asset may have more value.
Yeah. It was I recorded a podcast with David Yermak, who I believe is, he's a big expert on this, and he was talking about like, NFTs it's not just about collector's items. He says it can be about school records could be as an NFT, so that way you can't fake it because
that's exactly right.
Yeah. So also very interesting to think about all the different things that are going on. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about what are some of your favorite things. Now that you've gotten into it, you've gone down the rabbit hole, you've explored this idea. You're saying, okay, I need to create some NFTs, and you did. And hopefully the cloud stuff, the Chaos Cloud stuff helped a little bit creating those.
Very
NFTs.
much so. Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of things I can't render on my current machine, and being able to render online was very helpful. For sure.
Cool. So what are some of the favorite things that you've seen or interesting things that you're like, what are like, that's an interesting idea? Because I like the raft stuff with those busts were always very interesting to me. What are some of the ones that you've seen?
I think the great thing about Grassity's work is that he was very good at mingling certain subject matters, with certain style and be able to sell it to a needing audience, If I'm not a collector yet. I haven't bought other people's arts yet. Mm-hmm. But if I would probably not be necessarily a very good collector because I would go for the things I really love without necessarily thinking about the financial aspect to it and the resale value. And the reason why, I come from the very old school of speed painters, the digital painters online, things like that. And I have a huge respect and admiration for people that come from similar background. And I don't know if he has started selling them or not, but I know he was in discussions, is Craig Mullins. I consider Craig Mullins to be the father of my industry, or the modern father of our industry. And that's the kind of stuff that I would definitely collect. There are things like friends like Sparth, has been very good at selling his pieces because he's such a massive milestone of our industry as well. So I think for me, I'm more admirative to these things personally, but there's also but also all the stuff that's coming now that comes from more like algorithm-based rendering softwares, and which I find like admirable and beautiful. I love. There's some artists that do a lot of very geometrical shapes. That's kind of stuff that I could get behind as well. So for me, it's yeah. I would be very bad at reselling the artworks because I would buy them because of love, you know. So I don't know if I would be the best crypto collector out there, you know.
Well, artists are not always. That's the thing that's interesting. You know, artists have never been known to be great financial wizards, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
so suddenly we're thrust into a world of very complicated financial things. How has that journey been for you? Like, what are the hurdles that you've had to try to get into this?
It's been I would say it's been kind of brutal. For me as an artist, it's been more brutal on the emotional aspect of it, where I mean, it's suddenly I'm trying to put a price on my personal work, and it's something I've never had to do before, you know. So I'd say that emotionally I was a little tricky, where I'm like, well, I don't know if anybody's gonna like what I do, you know. So it was more in that term. Technically, I would say that, I mean, my wife has been very helpful. My wife is really I'm more of the artistic brain, and she's more of the organized brain, I would say, in terms of, on the financial level, you know. And she's been really good at, I could totally see her becoming a collector over the next few months. But she's been really good at looking at like the dynamics that have happened with Bitcoin and things like that over the last 10 years. And I've been more like really analyzing what's going on the art, what's selling, what's not selling. And but I think it was pretty brutal learning curve. It was like over 3 weeks, time of 3 weeks, I really had to really dive into that, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to buy cryptocurrency and
Correct.
open wallets and
Yeah.
do all that stuff. And it's, And we did that with Sally, and it was like, this is complicated. And I can imagine in that, I mean, it's possible, but it's also like, for some artists, I could see that being a real hurdle to try to get through.
Yeah, I think for the older guys, maybe a little more of a hurdle, you know. I think the people that have been very successful with crypto art in general have been people that have been in there for a little bit already, and they've grown up with it, you know. And there are people that they know that, like, there's a contact chain that exists, you know, and there's an understanding of the market, the cryptocurrency market that is very helpful. So I think, but the thing is that's great is that we're still in its infancy. So even though the curve may be hard, for some of us, it's just the beginning. So it's accepting the fact that...
And it might get easier? You think it's going to get easier?
Definitely. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, I think if you asked some people just like a few months ago, what do you know about cryptocurrency and what's going on now? I mean, there are interviews all the time now about cryptocurrencies and crypto art, and there's people explaining NFTs on night shows. You know, it's once again, there's a democratization that's happening that is massive. You know, and I wouldn't be surprised if in a few months from now, I mean, my grandmother, I don't have a grandmother anymore, but some grandmothers may invest in cryptocurrency. I don't know. You know, it's very plausible. I think banks are starting to realize what's going on. It's not just art, it's global, you know, and it's going to change. You know, my favorite book ever is *Sapiens*. You know, it's a book that I've read 3-4 times. You know, I love that book. And what's shocking is that, you know, I listen to it, you know, when I run or when I do exercise, and I've been through a passage I thought like, wow, that's so powerful, where he was explaining that industries and people's jobs are going to change overnight. I never expected it to happen to my industry.
Right.
And this is exactly what happened. One day I woke up and everything was different. And yes, it hasn't touched yet the job I do on movies or games too much yet, but I know it will, you know, and it has overnight. And this is something that is, it's touched my industry because we're really, really connected to technology. You know, we use technology on more than daily basis. You know, when I render at night and when I, you know, but every job nowadays is connected to technology. And the wave and the earthquake that we've seen in our industry, I can predict it it's going to be happening to many people. Some people will be ready, some people won't be ready, and it's going to be traumatizing for a lot of people. You know,
it also, you probably would never have gotten a crypto wallet if it wasn't for this, right?
Probably
right.
not.
And so now you're suddenly in that world. So it's almost like an entry. Here, artists, come into the crypto world through NFTs.
Completely. And there is that whole dimension that we haven't talked about, which is why NFTs are being so supported, why there are some people wanting to invest, why some people are wanting to attract the art industry in that world, is because there's a lot of money to be made, you know. And not necessarily just for art, you know. Yeah.
Right. And it's also interesting. So the other thing I was thinking about, was obviously the value of cryptocurrency keeps going. It fluctuates quite a bit, but it generally has been going up, right? A Bitcoin is like $50,000 or something crazy like that, right? So when someone buys a piece, let me look it up here. Raf's piece on, here he did one of Elon Musk, and it's 25 ethers, right? So that seems like a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
If you translate that into dollars.
Yes, correct.
But if that person bought 25 ethers 5 years ago, it wasn't that much money.
Correct.
So the value is just 25 ethers. So even though relative to the dollar, but if everyone switches over to cryptocurrency, it's not like everyone's rich again.
No,
they all have the same. It's all a level playing field.
Well, yeah, but the thing is that it's like every other market. Is like the market is going to evolve. It's going to go up and down. But based on what we know, and before it goes fully down, it's going to go way up. So a lot of people, I think, are seeing it as a really good way to invest now. Actually, not just a good way. It's a way better way to invest than putting money in your bank right now.
Right. I think it's going to be interesting to think about how this affects artists as well. How do you think it's going to affect the art market? I mean, you weren't too involved in the art world, where the art galleries, et cetera. But have you heard from artists that are, and like think about what their thoughts are on this process?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard everything. I've heard that. Some people, as soon as they made a lot of money, they just converted everything to dollars. Others, I think the smarter way is to keep it as digital money, as cryptocurrency, because I think it's a great investment to do now. After that, I mean, so there's a little bit everywhere under the sun right now. It's once again, it's like wild west, and it'd be very hard pressed to make a prediction, But a lot of people's reaction has been to sell and right away convert to dollars. I mean, cryptocurrency has still a long way up. A lot of people are going to join it, and it's going to bring more money. And honestly, I don't see. I mean, banks will have to go into that if they want to survive. I think,
Yeah, or we don't need banks.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a transformation, I would think. Yeah,
the ledger is taking care of itself, right?
That's correct.
You don't have to have a bank deal with the ledger anymore.
Correct. But we see once governments and.
You still need a loan. Okay, you still need a loan, and banks give you loans. But in terms of where you keep your money, you don't need that. So it's interesting.
The crypto loan sounds very dangerous.
It does sound very, very dangerous. But that's interesting. Yeah, it is interesting. So the big difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum, which was a lot, and obviously there's a ton of them, but the Bitcoin specifically, the problem with it is that it can only be used for money. That's all it can do. It can do one thing. Ethereum has a lot of
Correct.
possibilities to it. And the smart contracts, which is the key factor that makes it NFTs really interesting, is what's going to change everything.
That's
and the way
correct.
I think that David said it, not you, David Yermak. It's like what Bitcoin did to the banks, Ethereum's going to do to the insurance industry.
I can totally see that.
I can see that being very interesting. Well, listen, David, this has been a fascinating conversation. Always good chatting with you.
Same here.
I'm very excited to find out, obviously your stuff is up on Super Rare, so
Correct.
people can go check that out. And go look up David's work on Super Rare if you want to see that. But I'd highly encourage people I love actually just going to those sites, go to Super Rare, go to Foundation, go to a bunch of other ones, and just look around.
It's very addictive.
What people are buying. And it's what is also fascinating about it, which is great. If you go to one, like, if I go to like one of Raf's pieces or one of your pieces or whatever, and you can get all this metadata, how it's sold, where the blockchain started, what's the contract, all of that is embedded and visible to everyone to see that whole sequence. So it's much more than an image. It's a whole story and code and everything embedded into it, which is really interesting as well.
I think it's incredible. I think it's an incredible situation. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see on Foundation? I think one of the top ones they sold is Edward Snowden sold an NFT.
Yes.
For a lot.
Yes. Well, it's a perfect match, I would say.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's basically the document that he made an NFT out of it, and it was like, that's pretty interesting as an idea. And so just looking at that blockchain and understanding that and its transparency in a lot of ways is also very interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, sorry, you were finishing, but
okay.
What I like about what's going on is that there's new possibilities that are going to happen where there's going to be more specialized platforms, I think, that are going to come. So there are more for, right now, everything is in one platform or two platforms or five platforms at most. But you're going to have things that are specializing in concept art, things specializing in video making, in story making, and it's so vibrant and so exciting,
What I'm also excited about, actually, and this is another conversation I had with Samuel and Alex on a different episode, which probably would have already come out by the time you guys hear this one, but architecture, virtual architecture.
Oh my God! Yes, I think it's actually one of them for people like me, that come from creating environments and things like that. I think digital architecture and the metaverse is the next very big thing coming.
Yeah, for sure. And I've actually had some long conversations with my good friend Kevin Mack, who does a lot of VR art, and it's really beautiful. And I'm like, have you thought about the NFT thing? And he's like, yes, I have been thinking about this, but I can't really say I'm in or not. I'm just trying to understand the role it plays.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think that Ian Spriggs also said, he says, it's not necessarily that he wants to make a whole bunch of money on his art, but he just likes the fact that it's not just, wow, what a cool image, Ian. It's like, no, this actually has value.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's nice. It's like, no, this is valuable. And you know what? This is how much it's valued. It tells you right here on the block.
Well, not only valuable, but it will be a space that will be experienced in the metaverse, meaning that people will experience some environments the same way or sometimes more intensely than real places where they actually are on a daily basis. Like surreal places that have emotional value, not only as entertainment, but also as a feeling, sensation, So.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool. Thanks a lot. This has been great. Always great talking with you.
Same here.
And hopefully we can follow all of the cool stuff you're doing in the crypto world.
Thank you very much. I'll follow yours.
Yeah.